Bumblestripe wasn't that bad of a character in Omen of the Stars. Whoa, hey, relax. I know, I know. Put your pitchforks down first. Let's talk about it. While Bumblestripe was far from being as developed as he is post-Arc 4, people often bring up how he was portrayed during Omen of the Stars to provide reason behind his actions in more recent books. He's absolutely, positively one of the most controversial characters in the entire Warrior series, despite not even being an antagonist at all. Why is that? Let's take a look at the foundations of his character, his original character arc in Omen of the Stars, the difference between adaptation and correlation of circumstances, and his overall community reception. I'm Hawks, and this is Warrior's Hot Takes. We're first introduced to Bumblestripe in Power of Three as a kid, but his story never really takes off until the events of Omen of the Stars, when he's an apprentice and eventually made into a warrior. At the time, he's a minor character that shows romantic interest in Dovewing, and that's pretty much the extent of his actual screen time in the arc, other than his development after Briarlight's accident. The source of hatred for this character largely stems from beliefs that he's too intrusive in his relationship with Dovewing, doesn't understand boundaries in the progression of romantic interest, and pressures Dovewing, either inadvertently or not, as a ploy to force a connection between them that she simply doesn't reciprocate, which, of course, includes how he treats her during A Vision of Shadows and the Broken Code. So why wouldn't you hate him for that, other than out of sympathy? He displays all of those traits throughout the books very openly, and has frequently provided example after example of blatant incompetence as a partner, and demonstrates a genuine lack of understanding of social circumstances and cues. Basically, he's a resident nice guy. But it's not like Bumblestripe was designed from scratch like this. He didn't say, I love Dovewing and I'm sad that she doesn't like me back, so I'm gonna ask her to have kids with me at Pretty's funeral, as a kit or something. Like all other characters, he has to undergo some sort of development before that fact is really, well, existent, or let alone brought to the forefront as his defining character trait. It's pretty much a rule, otherwise it's frankly bad writing because it wouldn't properly represent how you or I would come to form an opinion either. While I'm here to argue for him in Omen of the Stars, in my eyes, this never really picks up until A Vision of Shadows. During A Vision of Shadows, Dovewing joins ShadowClan to continue her relationship with Tiger Heartstar after finally sorting out her feelings and affirming the realization that she loves him in a way that she could never truly feel about Bumblestripe. While Bumblestripe isn't initially a part of that problem, he eventually crosses the line too far when he suggests that he and Dovewing have kids during Purdy's mourning ceremony after his death to heart failure, despite the fact that they were no longer considered mates at the time. Dovewing is absolutely appalled at the suggestion, stating that it's the most inopportune of times to even consider having kids because of Darktail's reign, but Bumblestripe disagrees. Not only does Bumblestripe give this proposition during literally the most inappropriate time you could ever think of, going so far as to violate the sanctity of a funeral, but he himself is in denial of their previously absolved relationship and argues with Dovewing about his feelings over Purdy's fresh corpse. He admits that he's happy for her after Dovewing briefly returned to ThunderClan with her kits, but later shows hostility towards her during another instance afterwards. This hostility continues to grow during the events of the Broken Code, as he and Barrynose become the imposter's biggest supporters in the fight to punish codebreakers, which we can interpret as out of spite towards Dovewing for ultimately leaving him in favor of Tiger Heartstar. So, we first truly see Bumblestripe become intentionally manipulative in that he tries to capitalize off of Dovewing's sorrow during the bonus chapter in Shattered Sky, in view of the fact that he's probably delusional with grief after losing her. Beforehand, he's just kind of childish with his heart in the wrong place that plays the victim card a little too much and lets his immaturity and temporary emotions be the deciding factor of his actions, which makes him obsessive and ultimately flawed. However, the community likes to bring certain events during A Men of the Stars to light, coupled with a fair bit of fan theory that aims to paint him as the cat he is now before that development even occurred in the first place, saying that he used other cats to force Doveling into an early relationship with him. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not against formulating theory, nor am I against using it to negatively portray a character. It's just, in my own opinion, it gets a little ridiculous under these particular circumstances. While Doveling is peer pressured by her fellow clanmates to pursue Bumblestripe, there's no textual evidence that shows or doesn't show that Bumblestripe had any direct influence over his clanmates' perceptions / hopes for their relationship during this arc, excluding his talk with Whitewing and the Forgotten Warrior as far as I am aware. So, we can't just say that he emotionally manipulates her through other people. That's too far of a stretch considering our lack of evidence proving either side correct. But how does this apply to other circumstances throughout O Men of the Stars? The most frequent example I see of this is regarding the dialogue exchange between Cinderheart and Doveling before she and Bumblestripe go on a late night walk. During this scene in The Forgotten Warrior, Cinderheart encourages Doveling to give Bumblestripe a chance to get to know her better by accompanying him on the stroll through the forest that she just declined an invitation to. Though Doveling is reluctant to do so, she ultimately changes her mind because of what Cinderheart says and follows Bumblestripe out of camp. If you're following along, that doesn't seem all that bad, right? Well, let's take a look at a video by fellow content creator Bright Guardian Akira to gain a different perspective on this situation before we draw any conclusions. Also, Akira told me she'd prefer if I didn't repost the audio used during her video as it's a couple of years old, so I'll be dubbing over this clip. Then, Doveling kindly rejects an offer from Bumblestripe to go on a walk, and Cinderheart suddenly shows up and practically forces Doveling to change her mind. It's just really strange that out of nowhere, Cinderheart is completely ready to pressure Doveling in this way. This is just pure speculation, but I think that Bumblestripe deliberately requested that Cinderheart back him up in case Doveling rejected him. Due to her respect for the older warrior, Doveling couldn't say no. I am by no means using this as a platform to call out Bright Guardian Akira to shame her for drawing these conclusions, nor am I saying that she speaks for everyone. But that doesn't mean that I believe that everything she states here is entirely accurate based on contextual evidence provided in chapters prior and in this segment itself. Previously, we saw that Lionblaze had a falling out with Cinderheart after he revealed his identity as one of the three to her in private. While Cinderheart believes him, she becomes excessively upset, saying that she'll never be as important as he is, so they're not allowed to be in a relationship. Otherwise, she'd feel like she was getting in the way of his imminent responsibility to serve the clans. Lionblaze, completely dumbfounded, has no idea how to respond to this seemingly unexpected outburst, and Cinderheart runs back into the warrior's den crying. From this instance, we can infer that Cinderheart's tone and overall level of seriousness is in light of her conversation with Lionblaze, and we don't even have to work that out as the reader either. In the sentence after the excerpt provided, Doveling picks up on this too and decides to ask Cinderheart about it, to which Cinderheart outright confirms our speculations. So, if anything, Doveling is being emotionally manipulated by Cinderheart through her general embarrassment at being put in this situation. Not that Bumblestripe asked Cinderheart to back him up in case Doveling rejected him. Later on in the book, Doveling and Bumblestripe join Blossomfall and Toadstep for a training session with Brambleclaw in a small clearing that was previously on ShadowClan's side of the border. Upon Doveling and Bumblestripe's arrival, Brambleclaw greets them and offers to demonstrate a new move to the group. Blossomfall presses Bumblestripe to be sparring partners with her, but Bumblestripe refuses it in favor of Doveling, having arrived with her, and of course, Doveling seemingly being his mate at the time, based on the language used earlier in the chapter. Blossomfall gets furious at her rejection, despite having already been training with
footstep seconds prior, because they're littermates and he could have shown a little loyalty, you know. From what I've seen, some members of the community seem to believe that Dovewing's discomfort during this situation was at the fault of Bumblestripe choosing her over Blossomfall. While that isn't inherently untrue, that doesn't necessarily make it accurate either. In the text, this response from Dovewing is triggered after Blossomfall overreacts to Bumblestripe's polite refusal to be sparring partners with her, not at Bumblestripe's briskness with his sister, which was rightfully so anyway considering her attitude. To take it a step further, we can attribute Blossomfall's behavior to an overarching flaw in her character, her jealousy at being ignored by her family. Blossomfall has gone on record multiple times showing blatant characteristics of envy ever since Briarlight was hurt in fading echoes. These emotions spawned out of Blossomfall's feelings of neglect towards her mother after Millie became completely absorbed with Briarlight and ultimately seemed to not care for her other kids as much as she did for her. Blossomfall has even acknowledged these feelings herself, going so far as to say that it's the reason why she's training in the Dark Forest in the first place. So why can't any of this apply to Bumblestripe in the same way as it does to Millie? Blossomfall, at her core, is a self-righteous and covetous person who believes that she's entitled to attention, even her littermate's attention, not just her mother's, which is ultimately characterized by her visits to the Dark Forest instead of purely seeking it from Millie alone, over everyone else thanks to her mother's obsession with her sister. Nothing that Bumblestripe can say or do will ever change that. In The Last Hope, we're finally completely exposed to that immature side of Bumblestripe that I've been bringing up beforehand in full with the gathering scene in Chapter 13. On her way to the gathering, Dovewing is approached by Bumblestripe from just out of the corner of her eye. Except, he doesn't try to talk to her or anything. He just kind of silently matches her steps. Dovewing, being completely freaked out, and rightfully so, tries to run away from him after clearly being disinterested in starting a conversation, while Bumblestripe, being the insanely intelligent, attractive, and totally cool person that he is, gives chase to her. Quote, "The gray warriors seemed to be there every time she looked over her shoulder." Nice. Then, Bumblestripe catches up, complains a little, and Dovewing runs off down a slope after insulting him under her breath, only to be stopped by Rosepetal. "Why do you have to be so mean to him?" Rosepetal's whisper took Dovewing by surprise. "It's not a crime, you know." "What isn't?" Rosepetal's gaze darkened meaningfully as Bumblestripe raced past them. "What?" Dovewing repeated. Why did Rosepetal look so angry? "Because she likes him, read Bramblestar Storm, page 449. "It's obvious he likes you," Rosepetal snapped. "You don't have to keep biting his head off. He's your clanmate, not prey." Dovewing flattened her ears. Why should she feel bad? Why do I have to tiptoe around him just because he likes me? It's not my fault. Rosepetal looked sideways at her. "Do you enjoy hurting his feelings?" "Of course not." Guilt flashed under Dovewing's pelt. "Then apologize." To which Dovewing actually does, because she was guilt-tripped by Rosepetal into doing so, only to get caught up in Bumblestripe's temper tantrum and end up feeling even worse. But this is actually one of the only times I believe we don't see Dovewing acting completely reasonable in one of these situations either. While Bumblestripe is obviously being a total creep to her, and she's right to be upset, her justification is completely backwards, saying that she gave everything to the clan and he wanted more, and that it wasn't fair for him to say that he's just disappointed she's not the cat he thought she was. Obviously, Bumblestripe is still being completely selfish by turning the blame back on her too, but Dovewing isn't exactly a saint either. This was after she resumed her visits with Tiger Heartstar without the knowledge of her clanmates, so she comes across as a little hypocritical here because she's not actually upholding her beliefs like she thinks she is. But that doesn't make her a lesser character because of it. My point being, these characters have flaws, and that's what makes them actually characters and just as human as you or I. And no, Rosepetal was not a co-conspirator to Bumblestripe here either. She just likes him, like I said. I understand how it feels to want to hate Bumblestripe in this arc too.
He's just such a gigantic baby that doesn't realize what he's doing to Dovewing, and the way he is in newer books is just completely inexcusable. But while it is his fault, it's not intentional in Men of the Stars, because he has yet to be given reason to act that way other than being completely reactionary. That way being controlling or intentionally manipulative. Nor is he some conniving Dr. Evil type character with a diabolical plan to snatch Dovewing's heart away to keep her all to himself. He's just stupid. Completely and utterly stupid, with no conception of the connotations of his words and actions, because, again, he acts like a child by letting his emotions control him. So don't always be so quick to point the blame at Bumblestripe. Most of these scenarios are being used against him for the wrong reasons when he practically had no involvement with them behind the scenes at all. Bumblestripe isn't a good character, but that doesn't mean you should take advantage of his flaws and try as hard as possible to make him seem like a supervillain in earlier parts. His attempts at a romance with Dovewing were nothing short of lighthearted during Men of the Stars, and he only faults at his failure to understand that Dovewing isn't as interested in him as he is in her. This forces him to make decisions compulsively and thus immaturely without giving it a second thought, often without consideration of Dovewing's feelings. He is selfish, he is childish, and he is chivalrous towards Dovewing in a manner that belittles her identity as a woman with his overprotectiveness, but that doesn't mean he manipulates or abuses her. The conception of his character inside of Arc 4 ultimately boils down to cherry picking that spawned fan theory, thanks to just how often female protagonists are forced into relationships in this series. And I swear, Aarons, if there's not a female protagonist with actual female friends instead of one-dimensional minor characters to point out how a compliment during a hunting patrol could mean something more than he's leading on, or literally no one outside of her littermates, I will be so mad at if you'd excuse me. But seriously, Squirrelflight only talked to dudes, Leaf Fool, and the Prophecy Cats. Hollyleaf basically didn't have any friends. Ivy Pool hates everyone, and Twig Branch and Violet Shine didn't talk to anyone that wasn't in their adopted families. It's honestly pretty sad that Sorrel and Leaf Pool are the only good example of this that comes to mind when there should be more, but I digress. If not for Bumblestripe's actions after Men of the Stars, he could have been an actual contender to Tiger Heart Star in the long run, considering how The Last Hope ended, which seemed to be completely plausible before the team of editors. However, we may never know how it could have turned out living in a post-Vicky Holmes era of Warriors. While that may be the reality we live in, we could always say that Arc 4 Bumblestripe wasn't that bad. Hey guys, Hawks here. This is all just one giant take, so expect there to be a lot of pausing and a lot of me just being completely dumb, I guess. I don't know. Thank you so much for checking out my first video on the platform. I know it's kind of a longer one or whatever, but this took ages to make, like literal ages, like 2-3 weeks. Like, I did this script on the 23rd, I think, and it's the 31st. That's 8 days, but I can't count. But so yeah, huge shout out obviously to Bright Guardian Akira for allowing me to use her content for this video. It honestly meant the world to me whenever you know, responded to me. I didn't expect you to be so nice, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's rude, but I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just, you understand. But man, thank you. Truly, thank you. I just realized that I'm probably gonna repeat myself a lot because I don't remember what I said earlier. Whatever. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and maybe consider subscribing to my channel because I intend to upload more. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you all for watching again. I'm Hawks, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.